I have Cassidy Warren on today. Where did your start in this whole short-term rental, boutique hotels? Where did that kind of originate from?
It really came about from loving the curation of experiences for people. But we really liked the hospitality aspect. We liked the feeling that we got and then would be able to give to others. I always say real estate is not a money business, it's a people business because it's all based on relationships and the people that you have around you. The biggest hack that anyone can do is, if you're married, one of you should be a real estate professional. The world is much smaller than you believe it to be. And so that's why it's about your reach and your reputation, because you want your name in the rooms where you're not in, you want your name to be spoken of highly, right?
I love that.
And that's your reputation.
Hey everybody, it's Justin Brennan. Welcome into another podcast episode. And I have Cassidy Warren on today. And Cassidy, started, I know you're an outdoors kind of person, but then where did your start in this whole short-term rental, boutique hotels, this type of adventure? Where did that kind of originate from?
Great question. I think actually a lot of people in the short-term rental and hotel space have a similar journey. Love travel, love outdoors, also in van life. So I quit my job years back with my wife and I to travel in our camper van, converted it, did all the work myself, documented some of that with my wife and I on that journey. It really came about from loving the curation of experiences for people. And even early on when my wife and I traveled at a very budget, cheap way, being excited about certain things, especially from different countries where we would travel, that we would pull in these different elements into our designs. But we really liked the hospitality aspect. We liked the feeling that we got and then would be able to give to others. The other pieces, especially early on, Airbnbs were in neighborhoods where you couldn't get a hotel. And so you can experience a city in a way that you couldn't by staying at the downtown hotels, right? Where they just have all the towers and that's so. I think a lot of millennials are like this. I think a lot of people came from van life. There was a lot of travel for a lot of us the past, decade or more, and sort of bringing that stuff into our current reality with the properties that we buy, the way we go about our designs, and then just the love of real estate, which I didn't really know that I had until I started doing this more and more and realized like, oh yeah, I used to just go around driving around looking at houses in neighborhoods because I loved, even as a kid, like looking at architecture, looking at different designs and how the different neighborhoods and spaces made me feel. So that is sort of like, in a nutshell, the genesis of kind of my development into hospitality and real estate.
Yeah, and I always say that it's very hard to find anyone who doesn't love real estate in the different aspects of it. Like you say, some people love the architecture and the design side, and then they get into it and then they fall in love with the numbers. They're like, oh, this thing makes money. Yeah, makes money. But they don't, I just haven't found anybody unless they've been totally burned by it.
Because they bought a bad deal, probably. They bought a bad deal.
Right.
Yeah.
But, I just don't know a lot of people that be like, yeah, real estate sucks and I hate to invest in it. I have never met that. And the folks that do have a little bit of cynical attitude towards it, they've either lost a lot of money with it and they can't find a way to make money with it, so they probably need to look in the mirror a little bit versus the actual deal.
I always say real estate is not a money business, it's a people business. Because it's all based on relationships and the people that you have around you. If you got into a bad deal, it's probably because of a person, whether it's you or someone else or you not vetting someone else. It's not necessarily because the numbers didn't work out. So the other piece that I love about real estate is I come from an engineering background. And so the numbers, when I started learning about all the benefits, and I teach something called the velocity of money, which is around leverage and force appreciation, the tax benefits, and then getting equity. Those are the accelerators that I teach about the velocity of money. When you come from an engineering background or a scarcity or frugal background, 401k, maybe stocks and investments, save until retirement. But then you start looking at real estate, because I was walking around my neighborhood and I was like, how do all these people afford these houses? We live in a little condo. We just moved out, but we live in a little condo in a really nice neighborhood. And I was like, how do all these people afford these houses? And they're not here that often. So what is it? And then that's when I started doing some research and I found out all the additional benefits that you get from owning real estate. Not a primary, not your house, like we've been led to believe, which is also one of the reasons why I'm renting now instead of owning our primary. And so when you learn about cost segregation, depreciation, and just owning a business in general and getting write-offs, basically you pay for things and then you get taxed, versus as an employee, you get taxed and then you pay for things.
Yep.
Right. And if you
heard me, do you know the fundamentals as to why that is? I mean, I know the answer to it. I'm just curious if you do, because this was taught to me, not even that long ago. And I can't believe I went 40 years in my life without fully understanding the game of money. And
okay. No, yeah, teach me.
So, it was like 2 years ago, I went to a little conference, and this guy, Andrew Cordell, pretty well-known guy, gets up on stage. He runs all the Aspire conferences and a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
And he says, do you know what money is? And waits for everybody to give their responses and blah, blah, blah. And he says, money's a game. It's a game. And let me explain why. He says, you have two people in the capitalistic system in the United States. You have creators and you have contributors. You have creators and you have contributors. Contributors are W-2 employees, right? They're working for the man, probably making decent money in some cases, doing quite well, et cetera, have the 401k, the traditional method that we've all been taught for many, many years. And they are contributing to the system, right? Hence the name contributors. But they also get the least amount of tax breaks and least amount of tax benefits. And there's a reason why. The IRS does not love them. Okay, they just don't love them, and because they're not moving enough money. Okay, so then he says, and then you jump over to the creators. Right? These are the entrepreneurs. These are the investors. These are the business owners. These people are creating, right, products or services. They're putting them into the marketplace to be consumed by the contributors, who then the money leaves the pocketbooks of the contributors and it goes back over to the pocketbooks of the creators. And he says the reason why the creators make all the money is because the IRS loves them. Because the IRS says, listen, if you move a lot of money, we're going to give you a lot of tax breaks so that you can move more money. And it's not like they're doing it out of the goodwill of their heart. They need you to get really wealthy because at some point they're going to get their piece of the pie. It's just going to be a bigger pie. And so they need you to push and move money. And the more money you move, the more tax breaks you get. Hence the reason, right. It's like you're saying, real estate and all these other things, the velocity of money. If you move a lot of money, you get a lot of tax breaks. If you don't move a lot of money, you get screwed. That's capitalism 101. That's the United States, period.
That's right, 100%. And because before recently, I understood it a little bit differently, but it is the circulation of the money. It's the money moving and exchanging. And I don't think people really understand how much of the economy is just based on businesses exchanging goods and services together. It's not the homeowner that needs a new HVAC system that's driving the economy. It's the commercial real estate landlords that need a fleet of HVAC vehicles or people doing all these services. That's the money that's moving. And the reason, it's kind of tough because this is the argument of like, oh, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, trickle down economics. But really the genesis of capitalism and the support of capitalism in America is the way that the tax code has been written. The reason I love Airbnb still, I'm buying boutique hotels. That's where I'm heading. We're still going to buy some Airbnbs. We're going to focus on luxury flips at the higher dollar amount so that it's more worth our time and energy and our dollar goes further.
Yep.
But I still love Airbnbs for W-2 employees, the everyday American, like anybody that's trying to get their foot up and out of the trap of working a corporate job, if that's what they desire. Because as an Airbnb owner and a regular W-2 employee, this is the only time that you get the true tax advantages of owning investment real estate.
Sure.
And what I'm talking about specifically is cost segregation and depreciation.
Yep.
You cannot get that anywhere else. If you buy a long-term rental, if you buy just even if it's an expensive house down the road and you long-term rent it, you cannot get cost segregation and depreciation the way that you can with a short-term rental.
Correct.
So,
and yeah, it's mainly because of and now if you went and bought a multifamily apartment building, that's different. But yeah, you're right. If you're buying a single family rental property, it does. First of all, it doesn't make sense to do the cost segregation, which is why people won't do it. But it will on a short-term rental because of how you can write it off.
That's right.
And how it's treated, right, as a business.
Yeah, exactly. As a business, the short-term rental loophole, but it's not a loophole. It's just the way the tax code is written. And so I love being able to teach that to people, that you have access to these tax codes that you thought you may not have had. And it's hard to teach depreciation, but once you feel it and see it, and the regular W-2 employees that were either paying taxes at the end of the year always, or maybe they're coming out to zero, now they get a $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $100,000 refund from the government that first year that they bought that short-term rental. Then the light bulb goes off, and they have a cash flowing asset. So they got a huge refund from the government because they were paying their taxes every month on their paycheck. But then they got a short-term rental, they got a refund from the government, and they have cash flow from the cash flowing asset and appreciation and everything else that goes along with real estate. There is no other investment vehicle that can do this for the average person.
That's right. No, and it's you mentioned something there about it's hard to teach it until people feel it. And I agree with that, because it seems like phantom income to most people, right? And I can just speak from the light bulbs that went on in many of our investors' faces that were LP. They were limited partner passive investors in our deals, okay? But then we'll do the cost segregation, pass that benefit off to them in a K-1 statement that you're familiar with. Now, as you know, the biggest benefit is if you can classify yourself as call it a doctor and a real estate professional, okay? Because now you're going to get really the benefits passed through, where you can write off an enormous amount, including your doctor income. And so the first guy I'm thinking of, this doctor guy, comes in, first year he invests with us. He just gets a normal K-1, writes off as much as he can against capital gains, et cetera, but doesn't really write off against his ordinary income on his doctor income. He and his wife file jointly. Then he finds out, hey, if my wife has a real estate license and I can do a little bit of here and there, and since we file jointly, now we're real estate professionals. Now, next year, when he got his next K-1, right? Now he's writing off capital gains and his doctor's ordinary income and his wife's stuff. And that's when the real light bulb went off. I mean, he almost lost his shorts, because now he's sitting there, he's about to pay Uncle Sam $90,000. And instead he gets an $85,000 negative K-1, right? He just passes that negative K-1 statement to his accountant, writes off all of that gain that he was having on his income. I mean, he literally lost his shorts. He's like, Justin, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. He says, how is this legal? I said, let me tell you why it's legal, John. You're moving a lot of money.
You're moving a lot of money. And at some point along the way, a real estate lobbyist got the rules enacted that they want. And so like a lot of people say, and I don't care what political spectrum you're on. Like, you can feel how you want to feel about anything that's going on in politics or the economy or whatever state you live in. The fact is, if you want to get out of your situation, or if you want to improve your situation, or if you want to make more money or live more abundantly, you need to play the game. And for me, this is one of the easiest ways to play the game. And I'm really glad that you brought up the situation that you just did. The biggest hack that anyone can do is, if you're married, filing jointly, one of you should be a real estate professional. So what you were just describing was, the IRS calls it the REPS flag, the real estate professional status flag. Yeah, the REPS flag, real estate professional status.
Yeah, we need to cut this as a snippet. The REPS flag, I like it.
Yeah, the REPS flag. So the biggest hack that the everyday American, and I'm talking doctors, lawyers, engineers, software developers, anyone that's making any level of income and wants to improve their life, one spouse should be the heavy income earner. They just need to go make as much money as possible. Continue leveraging your skill set. Be the doctor, be the lawyer, be the engineer. Go make as much active income as you can. And the other spouse needs to get their REPS flag, the real estate professional status flag, so that they can invest all of that money into real estate, and then they can write off through depreciation, active depreciation, into to be able to save as much money on their taxes as possible. You will, if you do that in 2 years, you will have so much more real estate and so much more wealth than you ever thought possible. And
well, yeah, because you got to think about it, man. I mean, you're either going to put that money to Uncle Sam and your state taxes, and you know where that's going, into a black hole. Or you can go invest it into a real estate asset that's going to be appreciating and growing wealth for you. And it's the same thing, which is why the IRS is cool with it. And they're totally on board with it, because you're going to move money, grow wealth. At some point, they're going to get theirs, man. We all know this. But now they're going to get a piece of a much bigger pie. And that's why they allow it.
Yes. And I always say, there's that old saying, it's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep. And traditionally, we think that, I got to save pennies. How much do I have in my savings account? To me, how much you keep is based on how much you can depreciate and save on your taxes. How much you keep.
And there's, let me ask you this question and complete this statement. There's good debt and bad debt. Explain the difference.
Yeah. Bad debt is liabilities. Bad debt is your car payment, non-business car payment. Bad debt is any credit card debt, high interest debt, anything where the debt that it's secured on is not paying you money every month. So if you bought a bunch of clothes at Nordstrom and put it on a credit card, those clothes are not paying you money every month.
Right.
If you got debt on a cash flowing asset, like a house, like a hotel, like if you bought a commodity, whatever, I don't care. If you leverage the debt against your stock portfolio and you're getting dividends, that debt is secured so that asset can pay you every month, every year. That is good debt. Now, you have to determine what interest rate, how much you're leveraged, how much is it actually going to pay you, right? That's evaluating the deal. But really, you have to ask yourself, how much are you willing to pay to make a certain amount of money, right? So how much are you willing to pay every month or in your interest rate every month to make the amount of money that you want to make on that deal? And the amount of money that you make on the deal is not just based on the cash flow. For me, cash flow is the lowest value real estate investing opportunity. My highest value, and what most investors now at the top are investing for, is appreciation and tax benefits. Yeah. They are not investing for cash flow. So again, in the doctor, lawyer, engineer scenario, if you're making a ton of money, if you're making a good amount of money, don't invest for something that's going to cash flow. Invest for something that's going to make you the most amount of money through appreciation and through tax benefits. So what that looks like in reality is go get a mortgage, a loan on, let's just use houses. Go find the zip code in your area where it's the most expensive, most highest cost of living, highest appreciating zip code in your area. The one that just came to mind is Cherry Creek in the Denver, Colorado area. If you live in Denver and you know Cherry Creek, wouldn't you love to own a house in Cherry Creek? Go buy a house, fix it up a little bit, because you've just forced appreciation. Don't care about the cash flow because you've got cash coming from your high W-2 income.
Correct.
And that property is going to make you way more money on the appreciation and the tax benefits than it ever will on the cash flow.
Yeah. No, it's exactly right. And we see that a lot here in San Diego, where I'm at right now, is people are investing in SoCal, in San Diego specifically, a super unique, diverse economy. But you'll see people come in to preserve wealth, I call it, right? They're not even looking at the cash flow. But they'll come in, they'll put 50, 60% down, okay? Take out a 40, 50% mortgage. That's it. They'll get it to break even, or at least cash flow a little bit, right? Maybe 2, 3, 4%. That's the, like you said, least of their interest. It is about the appreciation game, because they know over a course of a 10-year window, that thing is going to probably double in value. And on top of that, the depreciation they get against their other income to wealth preservation. And that's why the real estate continues to go up here, because supply is constrained. And then you have people coming in who will pay a premium for exactly what you're talking about, wealth preservation, versus if you go buy stuff in the Midwest, right, or in the other areas, you are looking for cash flow, because it doesn't appreciate at the same rates and all these other things that happen there. You do need the cash flow.
That's right. If you're looking to quit your job, then you need cash flow. But I would also challenge that maybe you don't need cash flow. Maybe you need the right strategy, and you need to go and do some like luxury flips or a bigger project where you do a refi or you sell it, and then you get a bigger hit, and you learn to live off of the bigger hits versus just monthly cash flow. So it's just about teaching and spreading the word. I've been talking a lot about when to sell your asset too. So on the Velocity of Money, I teach people about what's called return on equity, or deciding when to sell your property. And you can always refinance, and that's a really good strategy too, but you don't get all your cash, right? You only get up to about 80% of the value of the property. And so
Gotcha.
we're in this phase of we're actually going to be selling a lot of our properties and trading up because if you look at how much cash flow you're earning versus the amount of equity that you have in the property, I like to look at and say, okay, if I can sell this property and after all fees, everything, if I can get 6 years of cash flow or more in one hit, I've just accelerated all that money forward.
Sure.
And I can instead of waiting 6 years to get the cash flow, I can sell and I can take that money and I can buy a bigger property, more expensive. I can start the tax benefits over again. I can appreciate on the higher value, and I should be still cash flowing because I'm buying good deals or breaking even at least, right? And so
where are you? You mentioned that you're looking at some boutique hotels and some luxury flips. Walk me through. I guess before we get into that, tell me about your first short-term rental.
Yes.
Like walk me through the financials of the deal, where it is, what it is, and all the bullshit you had to deal with.
Yeah. So 2 examples. I'll do the first one just because it's part of my story. It was our spare bedroom in our condo. We were trying to cover our mortgage. This was probably 11, 12 years ago now, 2015. So about 10 years ago. I would come home from work. I would flip this thing, like clean it. My wife would clean it. Like it was our spare bedroom. We had like one shower. So we were like coordinating with the guest to do that. This was like old Airbnb days, like 2015. This is a long time ago.
It's a good story though.
Yeah, $35 a night. Like that's what we were charging. It would cover 3/4 of our mortgage. And so that's where we learned everything. And then we said, okay, we want to go bigger, right? And then we looked at it from a business decision and based off what we believed we could afford, given down payment and purchase price. And so we ended up landing on Cleveland, Ohio. And a lot of people at the time were like, why Cleveland, guys? Why Cleveland? Like nobody understood why we were going out there. And we said, well, when we look at the numbers and it's in a great neighborhood. And so we bought it for $270,000. And like a lot of properties, the owners were going through divorce. And so we were able to like not capitalize on it. Like we didn't take advantage of them, but like we got a better deal on it because they were struggling. It was on the market for a long time. But it was in great condition and we just needed to do some minor upgrades. So we spent just 3 weeks, which on the first one, and if you've ever done an Airbnb, you know, 3 weeks is like no time at all to get something ready. And so we spent 3 weeks. I think we spent about $25,000 on furnishing, all the little renovations that we did, and we had it live. And that thing we just sold it, and I'll go over that, but over the last 5 years, that thing has done anywhere between 65 to 80K in gross, which is anywhere from like 30 to 40K in cash flow on a $270,000 purchase. So
yeah, that's silly. That's stupid.
Exactly. And so we were like, like easy. And so then we just kept going. We bought 2 every year for the last 5 years, essentially. And they got bigger, they got more expensive, bigger renovations, because I realized it was really the tax game a little bit. It was like, I was doing the numbers and it's like, we got to buy bigger. We got to do more renovations. We got to make these things worth more. They have to cash flow more. And so that became a little bit of a trap itself. And so we're pulling back from that and focusing more on single bigger projects. But on the Cleveland house, so we did, like, let's say we made 35K on average a year after everything. And we just sold it for 450K. And we got in our bank, thank you. In our bank, we got 200K after all fees and everything. And so if you divide 35K by 200 or vice versa, you get, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 6 years of cash flow, right?
Yep.
And so we are now going to go take that 200K and let's go say we're going to go buy a house, a new Airbnb with that. We could take that 200K and we could buy $1 million house.
Yeah.
Based on 20% down, right? We got to use some other money to go do renovations, but now instead of appreciating on a $450,000 house, we're now going to be appreciating on $1 million house, which is more money every year for us. Yep. We can do renovations and make that house worth 1.2, 1.4, right? So now we're appreciating on even higher dollar amount. We're cash flowing, and with the Cleveland house, we weren't getting any more tax benefits because we've used up all our cost segregation, all of our depreciation. Gotcha. So now we get to restart.
I mean, over a 5-year window, right? So yeah,
that's what I mean. So if you look at, basically, you want to look every 5 years. Like that's about how long you want to look at holding something. I'm not saying hold it longer or less, but like the 5-year mark for me now is where your tax benefits start to run out. And so then you want to start looking at your next
Now, how
move.
did the recapture work for you?
Yeah. So what we're doing, this is a great question. So what you're saying is, okay, we took all this depreciation. We did not 1031 on this, and I'll tell you why. And so that means that all that appreciation that we took, it comes back as income. Now it's going to look like income. And then we have the capital gains tax on the sale, right?
On the 200, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but what we're doing is we sold it in the beginning of the year, and we're
So
going to
by
be
the end
selling
of the year, you can do it again. Yeah.
That's right. Lazy 1031. And so it's more efficient to do the 1031, meaning we're using our tax benefits to offset tax benefits we could have offset with the 1031.
Sure.
But
see, as you know, the hard part about 1031 is the whole time constraints and identifying a property. And if you don't find a deal you like, then now you're like pigeonholed into time, right? And
that's right. And
you just hit the nail on the head, because we're literally in escrow on a deal. And I told them, because they wanted to close in December, and I said, no. I said, we're closing in probably February or March, because I said, I want early part of the year, because we're going to have a big taxable event or a gain. And I said, I want the remaining 9 months of the year, because we're going to go put it into other deals to then use the cost segregation method to wipe out the gain.
That's right.
And so we're planning that. So that's perfect that you nailed that versus closing in December and you're like, shit.
Right? That's right. Yeah. Because, and then that 45-day window is tough. That's really tough. And then the other thing that people don't know is, because we did this, we bought a piece of land, we 1031'd it, but we didn't find a replacement property. And they keep your money until the end of the 6-month window. So you have the 45-day window, 45 days to identify, 6 total months to close. If you don't identify a property, they are holding your money in that escrow account for the entire 6 months. So we did not get our cash for 6 months after selling the land.
So you learned that lesson, didn't you?
Yes.
I did not know that. That's actually, that's an interesting point you just made right there.
A lot of people don't know that. And so then you're forced into buying a deal that's probably not a good deal. And I've seen it a lot of times. And so I'd rather have the money in the account, and I'd rather be able to leverage it. And if I'm not being as efficient with the tax benefits, I'm fine with that if I buy a way better deal, because my strategy is always value add, is to come in and buy something and add value and make it worth a lot more. If you're just buying turnkey stuff, then you got to be careful, because you're not increasing your wealth as much.
Correct.
But if you're in control of the output, then your tax benefit efficiency, it's important, but it's not like you don't have to be so efficient every single time.
Yep. Agreed. I love that. So talk to me about, I guess, any kids yet, or just you and your wife?
No, just my wife and I, but we've got a lot of nieces and nephews that we love very much, and try to spoil.
Any plans on it, or not really?
No, it's not for us, but we give back by trying to be great aunts and uncles.
Hey, by all means, that's amazing. So what about, tell me a little bit about the deeper side of you. I mean, faith-based at all? Things you love to do. Obviously, you love to travel. You love to do this outdoorsy stuff, being around. Where'd you meet your wife? Because I'm always curious as to people's core value systems and why they're driven by what they're driven by. So share a little bit of that with me.
Yeah, it's a great question. And so a couple of years ago, it might be a different answer about what drives me and who I am as a person. I was burnout and tired of real estate. I was tired of talking about it. I was tired of managing contractors. I had anger issues. I was lashing out at lots of people. There was some codependency in the relationship that was showing up in weird ways and frustrating ways. I felt like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders. I felt like nobody knew my story except for me, and nobody was experiencing things, and I'm working so hard, and things aren't going well despite owning, lots of real estate and, making good money, but feeling so frustrated and stuck and isolated. And
was it because you were running all this time? How many properties, I guess? And this was a couple of years ago?
Yeah, this is 2 years ago. And actually it was this house that I'm in right now, that we were just finishing up a project. And I love this house, but it was one of the most frustrating it was the straw that broke the camel's back. And this was the ninth short-term rental that we had bought and renovated in 5 years.
Okay.
And this was one of the more expensive ones, more stress. I'm doing some consulting work to because I'm like, I got to keep the money coming in so I can pay for these real estate projects. And I thought I was like, hey, I'm doing the right thing. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm buying these properties. I'm renovating them. I know how to manage contractors. I thought I was doing everything right. But I could tell I was just at the frickin' ceiling. Like I was just hitting concrete over and over and over and over again. And I was just getting really frustrated and I didn't know what to do. And then I'm not faith-based, but spiritual. I'm like definitely in tune with people's energy and frequencies. And I found Dan Martell, who he is faith-based and I think in his own way. I don't know exactly how, but Dan Martell, this is before he just hit 1 million followers, but I found Dan. I actually flew up to Kelowna to meet with Dan, got to meet him, joined his coaching program. He's been my coach for a couple of years now. And that has been what has like completely and utterly changed my life.
Interesting.
To refocus my habits. Like Dan is the real deal. And if you've been around me at all, you know that I talk about him and he's been a big influence in my life. But what Dan taught me was that I needed to focus so much on myself before I could ever help anybody else. And at the same time that I met Dan and was going through his coaching program, I also started getting therapy. And therapy was, and I'm so lucky, my therapist is like out of this world, incredible. Like I don't know how I got matched up with her. Like the universe was like, coinciding to see me be successful with my personal development. But it all came down to like only focusing on what brings me joy and subtracting out the things that don't bring me joy. And so what that does is it makes you think and pay attention to how you're feeling and sit with your emotions and sit with your thoughts, subtract out the things, subtract out the distractions, the back-to-back meetings over and over and over again, the scrolling social media, paying attention to what other people are doing. So I had to relearn how to like be almost like a real human being. I know that sounds kind of weird, but I was learning how to get to the next
maybe
level.
reinstall good habits too, right?
Yeah, because through COVID and through the construction projects, like we were like sleeping on air mattresses and ordering in DoorDash all the time, like not working out, not staying fit. And so my core habits are now I read 10 pages every day. I work out every day, 5 main like lifting days, and then 2 days out trail running or whatever I'm doing.
Okay.
So reading, lifting. I post to social media 3 times a day. So that helps get rid of the isolation and helps share what's going on. I reach out to 5 people, at least 5 people every day. So I'm like in community, I'm staying connected, I'm like giving people big support, I'm showing up for other people, especially those that are showing up for themselves. And so like that's been really important. And then I'm reviewing my goals 3 times a day. And so all of those 5 things are what completely changed my life to be able to even be sitting here talking to you, to start my podcast, to transition into boutique hotels, to have the temperament to be able to level up and be in a room where other people are more successful than me and like be valued and be adding value, and not be frustrated, not, basically just become the best version of myself and on that continual journey of becoming the best version of myself.
I love that. I love it. And it was resonating a lot with me because I've similar paths in that. And you talked about Dan Martell. I did not know his story until recently, about his youth and literally being getting ready to take his life and the cops and all that shit. And I heard him talk to Ed Milet about it on a podcast. I'm like, oh my gosh, man. I said, holy cow. I'm reading his book right now, by the way. Buyback
It's one of the
Time.
best books. One of the best books you can read.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. If you don't mind me asking, what is this coaching program? What does it run? Maybe there's tiers. This is for myself personally. I can even cut this out, but I'm curious.
I think right now it's $9,000 a year for a group. Yeah, for group. He also does other things where you could do private. I think it's like $750 a year.
Yep.
And you have to basically apply. He's not just going to coach you if you have the money. And then he offers other things inside of his program. So it's interesting that you mentioned Ed and the podcast that he did, because I was actually on his jet with him. And this is one of the things that he offers inside of his program. Basically, at a break-even cost, he brings 4 people on to his private jet when he's going and doing these book tours or podcast tours.
Sure.
And so I got to fly with him
it basically allows him to fly free, right? And then
he gets to do coaching and there's content, and
yeah,
it was incredible. But I was there. That was the day he got the text from Ed about coming to the private island and being on the podcast, because Ed was his coach for about 2 years. And is one of the reasons why you've seen Dan go from his old YouTube stuff to Dan that has 1 million followers now.
Wow.
And the interesting thing about that is I was there and I hadn't done all these things that I've been telling you, those 5 daily non-negotiables, the things that I just outlined. I hadn't been doing those every day. I hadn't been doing everything that Dan's told me to do. And so I was on this jet with him, watching him do everything that he does and feeling a little bit like, oh man, I can't even begin to start to ask him stuff, even though we've interacted, but I knew that I wasn't doing the work. And
so you feel like an imposter a bit.
A little bit. And I was there knowing that I hadn't done the work. And so there was this moment where he got the text from Ed and he got the invite. And he said to me, he wasn't really even talking to me. He was kind of talking to Ether, but I was right there, and he was like, Ed's asked me to do this, and I've done this, and I've done this, and I've done more. I've done everything that Ed's asked me to do. I've done everything that Ed's asked me to do. If he wasn't going to ask me to be on this podcast, I was going to have a conversation with him. And so in that moment, I remember thinking, oh man, this entrepreneurial journey never stops. Here's Dan trying to live up to Ed's expectations. But really what ended up a week later, after reflecting on everything of being on the jet, I realized he was talking to me. And he was saying, Cassidy, you want something, but you haven't done everything that I've asked you to do. So without him just looking at me and shaking me and saying, Cassidy, you need to fucking step up and do what I've asked you to do. He was using his experience to tell me, without just telling me, that I need to do everything that he's asked me to do. And then the things will start to happen. And from that moment on, that was back end of July last year. From that moment on, I committed to going pro, to going all in, doing all those things and doing everything that he's asked me to do. And that's when everything's really started to change. I
love that.
Summer of last year.
Yeah, I had a chance to briefly meet Dan I was at Ryan Pineda's WealthCon event a couple of years ago, and I was up in one of the private rooms that they have there. That's where I actually met Beardy Brandon for the first time. And Dan was up there too, with Bradley and a few other folks. And he is a real deal. You said it, man. He's the real deal. What he's done to his body too the last year or two, whatever. My gosh, man. Yeah. The guy's he's a freaking adrenaline junkie animal. That's what he calls himself. Yeah. But just mad respect. After learning his story, after learning everything he's gone through, what he's doing. You have a pretty decent relationship with him, I'm guessing, now that you're in his program?
Yeah, I'm in his coaching program, and I'm also in the fitness program. And yeah.
So
you
my
can
goal. Probably attest to it. Is it worth someone like me going on it?
Oh, absolutely. It's changed my life. Now you got to do the things that he says and show up to the calls. Yeah, show up to the calls.
That is going to call you out, which I love. So that's good.
And he always does. The thing that when I got in that program and I saw him calling people out, I was like, oh, permission to be this way, because I came from corporate. And I was doing that stuff in corporate, but then in corporate, they just no, you don't fit in here. And so then to come out and be in the entrepreneurial world and see someone like Dan do it. And Dan absolutely is the real deal. And so whether it's Dan or someone else, everybody needs a coach, and Dan's program will change your life if you do the work. And that's true of any coaching program if you do the work. But yeah, no, I highly recommend it. And actually, I recommend the fitness program over anything else, because you get into the best shape of your life, you restart your habits, you feel better about yourself, and you get Dan on a call. And because it's a smaller group, you get access to Dan very easily and ask him questions. And then you get the fitness part of it, and it's cheaper. So my recommendation is do the fitness.
There's two different programs, fitness and then the personal coaching.
That's right. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll look into that. I may even reach out to you about the best way to do that. Maybe you get a referral on your end or something. I don't know. But that's
I
so
think he just
interesting.
keeps track. I don't think I don't get anything, but I think he keeps track.
know.
So I think I've got about 10
Um,
people in there now. So
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, it's all about reciprocity and helping people out and connecting. But I've been
that's right.
following him for a while now and in the middle of his book. So I'm like right in it, immersed. It's
Yeah.
pretty wild. So,
Yeah.
did this help out with like, did you go through, how long you been married?
13, it'll be 14 years this year. 14
Okay.
years this
So
year.
a decent amount of time.
Yeah.
Decent amount of time. You've obviously had ups and downs with it. At what point were there the biggest struggles where you think doing the stuff you've done now has helped maybe in that relationship and bring you guys closer?
Yeah, great question. Because when you work together, especially doing entrepreneurial stuff, and when you're overloaded and you're stressed, it gets squishy and difficult and tenuous at times because you each have to play certain roles. And so a lot of times I was having to play like the CEO or the manager role. And that's not a really fun place to be for anybody in a relationship. And so the evolution through that was me letting go of a lot and learning to let go of a lot. Uh, but it wasn't until I really did the work on myself and only focused on myself did I recognize that I was projecting a lot of my own desires and needs onto my wife as if she was supposed to fulfill them. And so that's sort of what I was mentioning with the codependency piece is we got to this point where both of us felt like we each had to make the decisions together on everything. But that isn't conducive to efficiency or healthy habits or a quality marriage. And there's, you need downtime too. But we were
Yep.
just like in the thick of everything. And so it was like 10, 12-hour days every day for years, really, of doing all this. And then it's decisions about contractors, about money, about operations, and we're
Right.
doing
Yeah.
everything.
It's not romantic or sexy, is it?
No, exactly. And so you find time for date nights here and there, but that's one thing that we've implemented is a date night every week. But doing the work on ourselves. So I have this term now called together but separate, because I realize that every relationship and what everyone deserves is to have their own individual personality and individual life, but with their partner. So you create your own life, you create your own reality, you create your own identity. And then that should be about, in my opinion, 60 to 70% of your life. And then there's the 30 to 40% that overlaps between you and your wife.
Gotcha.
And I think that's where happiness can come from.
Sure.
Is being able to create your own hobbies, your own friends, your own business, right? So a little story, when I decided to go switch to boutique hotels and get away from Airbnbs and short-term rentals, I basically sat my wife down and said, hey, I'm going to do this. You can come along if you want, but you have to figure out where you fit into this independently of my journey.
Okay.
Right. So this is not.
Was that hard for her? Like to kind of, since you've been basically attached at the hip on so much of it, did she feel like, oh, like I'm not part of this journey?
I think initially that might have been the feeling, but honestly, I think it ended up being really freeing for her to not feel obligated to play the same roles that we had played up to that point. And so I think it was more freeing than anything. The conversation went really well, actually. It's not easy to say those things.
No, not at all. I mean, especially if they feel like, wait a minute, what? You're going to do what? You're not including me? Like that whole thing, right?
Yeah, because part of what I was saying was, because she does a lot of the designs. She does a lot. She does operations. She does a lot of the designs for the properties. But part of what I was saying is like, look, I'm going into boutique hotels. That means like bigger money, bigger players, more professionals. So if you want to do designs or if you want to have a role in this, you have to figure out how to meet the needs and expectations of whatever role you're trying to play. Right. And that means working and doing other things that are different than what you're doing right now. And it's not just me and you coming to the table as we're going to buy this thing. It's like we have to almost be independent because I'm going to run the hotel business and you're going to run this business, or even just shut this thing down. So I think that was actually a really big moment for me because I talked about, hey, only focus on things that bring you joy and what you want to do. I was so focused on only the things that I wanted that for me to come to the table and say, hey, this is what I want and this is what I need. And I'm going to basically do it no matter what. And it's because that's what I wanted. And I realized that I had been kind of avoiding the thing that I knew that I needed to do, which was say, this is what I want to do. Let's figure out how to get me out of everything else and support you and what you need to run everything else. And I think this is the right decision for us.
And so are you liquidating all your short terms to move into this avenue, or are you going to keep some? And
we're going to keep a few, and we're not going to sell them all this year, but there's a few that just have a bunch of equity, and so we can tap on that, but we don't need to liquidate everything right now. And then there's a few that have still some potential upside through renovations, or like there's one that we have on Whidbey Island that we didn't put as much love and time and attention into it, that we're going to go back and we're going to spend a little bit more time and attention and hopefully just kind of make that one extra nice. But yes, basically we're peeling this money off. We're investing in ourselves. So there's going to be investment in coaching, in other programs. I started the podcast. It's called the For Your Own Good podcast.
I know. I was looking into that. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're releasing episode 10 this week. And so we're doing 3 a week. But a lot of the money is not going to be used just to go invest into hard assets, which is a different route than I'm used to. You can go take money and you can figure out your return on investment and how much you're going to make and all that.
Right.
We're taking some of that and putting it into coaching, putting it into mentorship, putting it into buying all this equipment and travel and trying to make something work for ourselves through like marketing, basically.
Yeah. Well, and it's investment in you. Call it self-development, call it whatever you want. And I was trying to think, I think the number it was crazy. So do you know Andy Elliott's story?
Yes. Yeah.
So I ran into, I was just out with him and his wife, Jacqueline, and, learned from them a little bit, and was chatting with Jacqueline, and I asked her, I said, you guys rose like 0 to hero in like 4 years. And she's like, well, it wasn't really, it was a lot longer than that, but it probably seemed like it was that. And I said, like, where was that moment? And she said, well, we had to make a decision. We were doing okay, but not where we wanted to be. And I had to have a tough conversation with Andy because he was doing things and not stepping up for the family, et cetera. And she had that tough conversation with him and for the family and the kids and all that. They ended up selling their house, taking all the cash, sleeping on mattresses in another house for a while, investing almost $700,000 into self-development with Brad Lee and many others, right? And then within a meteoric rise, we've all watched it happen over the last several years, rock and roll. And now he's running $150 to $200 million sales enterprise, right? And coaching enterprise. But they had to, as they call it, kill off their old selves. But the self-development, the point being behind this is to invest into themselves that amount of money into self-development and coaching and guidance and trying to move this needle, right? And that includes everything from marketing to coaching to this to that to get that pendulum swing. And it clearly worked because they stepped up. But same thing for you. I mean, yeah, physical assets where there's an ROI you can calculate, but then there's things you can't calculate an ROI on, but are going to actually help you move the needle. And part of that is shaking more hands. Because I always say the more hands you shake, the more money you make.
Yeah. And things don't change until they change. And you can either make the change or the change can make you, right?
Yeah.
So you're living life by design or you're living life by default. And you're right. I am killing off the old version of myself. And I will tell you, I have about 2,000 followers right now. And I started with about 200. It took me a year to get to 2,000, but that 2,000 is a core group of heavily engaged people that are watching my stuff, and they are all behind me. There's a ton of momentum behind me from all these people that are following me, and they can see my content. They can see what I'm doing. They understand it. They they message me like daily about how much they appreciate the stuff that I'm doing. And so for me, you said it like this year, I've named this year, it's the year of reach and reputation, connect and create. So it is not about buying assets this year, which I may still do, which I have to if I want to save on taxes. But this year is about getting in front of more people, connecting with more people, because nobody knows who I am. And that's the biggest problem for a lot of people in their businesses. Nobody knows who you are, and you're unwilling to put yourself out there on social media. Andy Elliott, great example, because I remember that story. They did sell their house, and they invested everything that they had into self-improvement, and they did everything that was required of them and more. And then you see the result of that, right?
Yep.
And it fundamentally comes down to, are you willing to go all in on yourself? Are you willing to turn pro on the things that you know that you need to do to go be successful? And so that's what this year is for me. And as long as you're focusing on the things that you want to do and that light you up, and you get rid of the things that like sap your energy and take your time energy, and the more that you can evaluate how you're feeling in every given moment, because how you feel, I know there's different takes on this. I think Hermosi and others say like it doesn't matter how you feel, which is true to an extent. But if you can evaluate how you're feeling in the moments and the meetings and the conversations, and then figure out how to delegate or transfer the things that don't light you up and don't give you energy, and you're just operating in your zone of genius and your flow state at all times for the thing that you love doing, then that's when the universe will just continue to pour into you and give you everything that you've ever desired.
I love it. That's a snippet. That's a good snippet right there. I should probably connect you with my girlfriend, Kate, because she worked with Ryan Pineda, brand strategy and all that for a few years, and still kind of working with him. Because it's interesting, like you said, 200 to 2,000 and kind of growing your brand, relatively successful entrepreneur that's kind of at the precipice of, okay, I'm a successful guy, but I'm trying to be significant, right?
That's right.
And you're kind of right at that precipice where you're ready to go. It's very interesting. I'll connect you with her when we get off on a text.
Definitely.
She focuses on that specifically, working with men, ironically, that are somewhat successful already, but they're trying to be significant.
That's right.
And so, right along Ryan, she learned a lot, but it's pretty wild. And just, it's crazy. It's interesting to me how connected a lot of these influencer, stage talker, like people on stages, coaches and consultants and all these people are in the industry, right? They all know each other. You know, Dan knows this guy, and that guy knows that guy, and Ryan knows this guy, and these people know these guys, and they all circle and they show up on stages and do the stage circuit too. And it's all interconnected.
The world is much smaller than you believe it to be. The people that are doing the work, and like you said, the ones that are trying to be significant at each level, the circles get smaller and smaller and smaller, and everybody does know each other. And so that's why it's about your reach and your reputation, because you want your name in the rooms where you're not in. You want your name to be spoken of highly, right?
I love that.
And that's your reputation. And so when you show up to a room, when you show up to a small circle, people already know how they're supposed to feel about you. And that's really important.
I love it. You're speaking the words I love, man. We could go on for 14 hours.
I know, dude. Justin, this is great, man.
Well, listen, I really appreciate you. I mean, this is cool. Taking the time to come on and be a part of this. And if you ever need a guest, I'd be happy to be on yours too. So you got to just let me know, and be happy to be a part of that and part of this journey with you, and see how I can collaborate and help you.
Yeah, Justin, I'll be in San Diego soon. I'm there every month, and so I will absolutely hit you up. And I don't know if you know, but I'm basically bringing all my podcast gear to like every city I go to over the next year. Dude, yeah, I'm on like my own little podcast tour because I'm prioritizing in person.
I love it.
Yeah,
that's
so
cool.
I'll be in San Diego probably like maybe the end of March. And we'll meet up
for the first time. Because my girlfriend Kate just interviewed. I don't know if you know who Adam Allred is.
Yeah.
So she just interviewed him on her podcast, and anyhow, so now we're connected with his wife and the four of us basically. So they're like, fly up to Utah and you can interview. Let's do an interview and podcast up here. So this is the first time I'm going to take all this podcast stuff on a little bit of mini trip into Utah. So that's funny that you're doing it all over the place. I like that.
Well, just what I did, I got a big old luggage and I paid the heavy equipment fee. I stuffed a bunch of extra clothes and stuff, but everything that I needed fit in that one piece of luggage, and it's actually pretty simple to set up. So it's kind of fun. So
there we go.
That's dope, man. I've had a ton of fun today. Thank you, man. Would love the connections. Would love you to be on next time I'm in San Diego. And for your listeners out there, they can follow me on Instagram. It's at Cassidy.Warren. That's Cassidy with a K. And the podcast is called For Your Own Good. It's on Spotify with video, and then Apple, and then we'll be starting to upload to YouTube very, very soon.